Welcome to the show, guys. It is me again, your fearless leader, Uncle Creepy Ian McCall. And you know what? I'm gonna throw this out there. For some reason, I don't know how, but I am becoming. I'd like to become the moral mouthpiece of this sport because our sport is morally corrupted by a bunch of dickheads. And today or tonight, we are. Oh man, we're diving into one of my favorite topics: how much I hate Ali Abdelaziz. Okay, because as Connor said the other day, he is a terrorist snitch. He is a snake. I'm excited to say that I'm joined by a man named Mike Russell, who has given us so much information about Ali and his douchebaggery and all the fuckery he's done, all the double crossing, just being a complete snake. I mean, I called him out strictly on the fact that he was just on a terrorist watch list because I know this. But then the amount of information I've learned over the last couple weeks almost made my head explode. It is fucking insane. So again, here we go. Mike Russell, people. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And this is one thing I want to start off with. You have been shunned and silenced by so many, finger quotes, great journalists in our sport because it's such a taboo topic, I guess. I don't understand why, but I'm here to protect this fucking sport that I helped build. Okay, I've been doing this. I started fighting professionally in 2002. This is my life. This is my love. This is the mistress of my entire existence, is this sport. And to see people in it that are evil, are snakes, I can't have it. And someone like you is I mean, I'm just a mouthpiece. You are the guy that put in the work and did, and God, you brought to light so many amazing things. And we're going to touch on it all tonight. So, I mean, how's everything going up there in Canada?
It's going well, man. That's a hell of an intro. But yeah, I spent probably the last 3 years on this story. I've got another job, so it's not like I'm 40 hours a week working on this. But I've basically only done 2 stories in the last 3 years with my website since I went independent. I'm the same as you. I just want this sport clean. And I want this sport, free from corruption. I want a level playing field for everybody. But as you know, there are certain people that get certain advantages, and there's certain people that are disadvantaged because of the way the sport is run. And that's what I want to do, is to level the playing field. So everybody asks, what is your motivation for this? It's obviously not money, because I haven't made any off of any of these stories. But I wrote this story originally in 2015, and people basically ignored it. And they had varying reasons why. People said, well, there's not enough evidence, which is, it's understandable. You want to see some actual evidence. But I had, I'd spoken to some NYPD officers that knew Ali. And, all of a sudden, Ali called the NYPD to try to have the NYPD officer who spoke to me on the record arrested because he's trying to stifle the story. So he has been, for lack of a better word, fucking around with journalism by getting in touch with journalists and threatening them and throwing veiled threats out to them. I'm not going to name who they are, but he knows who they are, and he knows what he's done. He's, my name has been in stories, and he's called them up and asked them to remove not only my name, but any information that I've posted in stories. So there's this fear of Ali that's been, perpetuated by himself, because he's a different person in real life than who he says he is. So everybody says, are you afraid that, anything's going to happen out of this, that he's going to come after you or anything like that? I'm not really afraid of anything that Ali's going to do, because he's being, closely monitored by a lot of agencies. So
by the government, by the FBI and stuff.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing people don't understand, that and I want to make this abundantly clear. This has nothing to do with race, color, creed, anything. This has to do with someone being a bad person. And, it all started with me, with my wrestling coach, Daryl Christians. And I never got a good feeling from Ali in general. But when I heard he was on a terrorist watch list, being the very proud American I am, I right away started talking shit. And he threatened to sue me and blah, 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 and this and that. And I just went, you know what? I go, look at our president. you could do whatever you want. You're on a fucking watch list. You're never gonna do shit to me, okay? Number one, this is not how it works. I can voice my opinion, but now that I've found this amount of dirt through people like you, wow, I mean, this guy needs to be kicked out of this fucking country, and he needs to be sent back to whatever rock he crawled out from under. It is disgusting, and I'll delve into this story real quick. So I started talking trash, and then I'm cutting weight in New York, okay, and I'm sitting in the sauna with Glover, Teixeira, and Jacare, and we're cutting weight. And all of a sudden, Khabib and them come in, and you know, they roam in packs, and they all, you know, kind of. I get this feeling, and I'm looking around, I'm like, oh, okay, what's happening here? They go, why are you talking shit on Ali? And I thought they were talking about Bagotinov, and I'm like, well, he popped for steroids and he still lost, so I got to give the guy a shit. I'll give him a hug when I see him, but I'm gonna give him a hard time. And they go, no, you're talking about our brother, our agent. And I went, oh, wow, okay. Now you guys want to corner me about this. I said, you know what? How about we all sit down and have a debate? You know, because they're trying to bicker with me and, like, intimidate me like I give a flying fuck. What are you going to do, beat me up? No, you're not. Okay, number one, I've got two giant Brazilians here that will protect my ass because I've known them forever. Number two, we're at a UFC event. We're at a nice hotel in Brooklyn. There's people everywhere. My coaches are outside. Shit is not going to happen, okay? And either way, what are you gonna do? Beat me up? Big deal. I've had my ass kicked before. I've had my head stomped in by skinheads multiple times, okay? I don't care about getting beat up. So, you know, we're talking, and I look to Khabib and I go, listen, you're a proud Russian, right? You're a proud Dagestani, correct? Yes. I said, okay. If someone came into your country and was a known terrorist against the country you're so proud of, what would you guys do? And they all kind of went, oh, you know, we'd fucking kill him. I said, exactly. I'm a proud American. This is my country. All I'm doing, I'm not trying to kill him, throw him off a building, anything. I'm just trying to make him look like a dickhead. That's all. You want to keep debating? And Khabib sat back and goes, you know what? Enough. I'm sorry. You need to cut weight. He actually apologized. It was super cool. I mean, it got heated for a second, but that was more or less, you know, Khabib's little underling friends. But Khabib was super cool about it. Then after that, I finished cutting weight. I'm at 125 pounds because, you know, when I make weight, I make championship weight. That's just how I do it. And I'm laying on the floor talking to my coach, like on my stomach, you know. And all of a sudden, I hear this banter behind me. Fuck you, this, fuck that, blah, 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 whatever. And I roll over it, and it's Ali. And he's saying how he's going to beat me up and how this and that. And I can't say that. He's got kids and all this stuff. And I'm just hysterically laughing. And I'm literally on death's doorstep because I'm at 125 pounds and just thinking, this guy picks this time to choose to try and fight me. Of course you do, because you're weak. You see me in an altered state and you're trying to fight me. Wow, you're fucking pathetic. And I made him look bad and he left and he got escorted out. But that just right there made me realize that I am deep under his skin, and it was entertainment to me. You know, then I just wanted to fuck with him more. Well, once I found out about all the stuff you put out, and granted, my wrestling coach sent me the article. Now I want to destroy. I want to destroy him. He has to get out of our sport. And to any fighter out there, Frankie Edgar, all the Russian guys, anyone. Is it Kayla Harris? She's represented by him. If you are represented by this man, shame on you. Shame on you. Honestly, fuck you. You guys need to think outside of the box. Okay, the guy's a bad person, and now you all know the facts, so get your shit together and get rid of him and get with someone who's honest. You know, I mean, sure, if you want to step in the same direction, go with Malky. He's a shitbag. You like that kind of guy? Go there. You want someone honest? Go to Jason House, Jeremy Luchow, you know, Iridium. Those are honest, good, hardworking people. Monty Cox, great guy. We can't have trash like this in our sport. You know, did you guys agree?
Yeah, and you got to think about it this way. He built Dominance MMA up illegally, And that's kind of where everybody kind of goes back to, how is all of these, the stories like we hear, how are they relevant, as far as his personal life and everything else in his past? It's all relevant because you look at how he built dominance. I did an interview actually with him in 2012. I've got the tape of it. It's going to be on my on the podcast, kind of explaining where it all started with me, where I started looking into him. I put a complaint in against World Series of Fighting because I had evidence that he was not only managing people, but he was using his role as a manager to attract people by getting other managers to sign over the rights of their fighters, and he would give them 5%, he would take 15%. He was charging the fighters 20%. But the thing is, he was doing that to get them in the World Series of Fighting $1 million tournament that they were putting on then at the time.
Which is highly illegal.
Yes, so many different ways of illegal. So we've got that element of it. We've got the other element that I've got more than probably half dozen people that have witnessed him cashing bets after World Series of Fighting events. So he's matchmaking, making the matches. He's the person at the other side of the table negotiating, or he was with World Series of Fighting, negotiating at the other side of the table. So he was always giving the best amount of money to his fighters. I have cases where some of the fighters were making $7,000 to fight his fighters that were making $36,000 and $36,000. So his champions all made $100,000, and he had all the champions, and he was taking between 10 and 20% of what they made. So he was getting money from World Series of Fighting to make the fights and to get sponsors. He was also being paid by AutoShopper to be their sponsor liaison. So he was getting paid to give his fighters sponsorship and then taking money from the fighters. So he was getting paid with every deal that he was doing on every side of the negotiation table, and probably taking, in some cases, more than the fighters for every event. So everybody's like, why is this a big deal? Well, we found out that through Paul Gift and John Nash actually were the reasons why I started coming forward with what I had again after 2012, and everybody kind of ignored me. So all the stuff that they brought out about Ali possibly being in breach of Nevada state law I was like, well, I've got evidence of that. I've got proof of it. I've got, not only the fact that he was doing these jobs and saying he was a manager, saying he was a matchmaker, he had like a cabal of people helping him. He had a bunch of other managers and people in the industry posing as fighter managers. So you want to talk about, everybody talks about how he's a great guy, and they're coming out and talking about him. Nick Newell, who he signed recently.
Yeah.
When Nick Newell was fighting for World Series of Fighting, Ali was managing Justin Gaethje secretly. And he had the guy that was the sponsor guy for Hayabusa, Kyle Stoltz, pretending that he was managing Gaethje to hide this conflict of interest. So he negotiated that fight for Gaethje. What happened was they go on NBC, regular NBC. I believe it was the vice president of NBC's elderly mother, tuned into it and watched Gaethje basically beat Nick. Nick's a great fighter. He's done very well for himself, and every opportunity he's gotten on his own merits, but he was overmatched in that fight.
Yes.
And that was a fight that never should have been made. So that cost World Series of Fighting, because this is how Ali got that fight done. He had a video that he had of Nick that he put in front of one of the executives of World Series of Fighting, and he played it. And while this executive, and just speaks to the type of con man he was. He always had different layers of the cons he was using. He put on this tear-jerking video using Nick. And when this man was almost in tears, he handed the phone to him with Nick Newell on the phone, thanking him for letting him, approving this fight, which was never approved before this. He used it as a manipulative technique to say, hey, can you approve, basically making him approve the fight that he had rejected about 10 times prior, because he was like, I don't know, that fight seems like it's overmatched. So he still says he's haunted by this. He's like, that's one of the things that really bothered me, was that was how it went down, and that I allowed that fight to happen, because they lost their TV deal for 2 years because of that. Because of the elderly mother watching it, she thought that it was a spectacle that, obviously a man with a congenital birth defect was being beaten and bloodied by another man inside a cage. That was her optics as somebody that didn't watch the sport. So she basically gave her son shit over it, and he pulled the plug and said, no more live events. We're not doing that, because they had complaints as well about how overmatched the fight was. And that was the main event. So that caused them a bunch of problems. So when you see that, the other thing is there was another kid that they had booked on a card that had, he was I think an amputee that had one leg, Matt Betzold. Yes. He was booked on an event and this just speaks to the duplicity of Ali, that's like letting on that, he's out there for Nick and that he's doing the best for Nick. He called up Betzold's manager, and he was already booked on a card, like on his next card that was a local card. He had to tell all of his relatives, friends, family that he wasn't fighting on the card. And the reason that Ali gave him was that we can't have another Nick Newell situation here. That was his excuse. That was the way they broke it to him, was that they couldn't afford another Nick Newell situation. They didn't care about him. They didn't care about the fact that he was getting the same opportunity as Nick. They didn't care about any of that. Ali cared about one thing, and it was because he had his hooks in on that fight. It never should have happened. So then we hear he comes out and he's managing Nick, and he's trying to get him on the Ultimate Fighter and everything else. That's more of I think what people are overlooking is the fact that Ali is doing this. He's signing people with the promise of what he's going to do because he's advertising his close relationship with the matchmakers at the UFC. He's always taking pictures with them after every event. Apparently he's seen, going into back rooms with some of them, I've been told. There was another event that he was, at the bar with them, and they say that he doesn't drink, but he buys some of the drinks for people that are around him. So, I don't have evidence other than people seeing this, but I'll tell you, man, I get a lot of texts about this, and managers are telling me that they're losing clients because he's promising clients that he will get them on certain cards, and then it happens. So it's a bad look when we look at how the antitrust suit is playing out. And we got that, the deposition by Ali, where it was like he was like basically a UFC house manager, the way that he was like, telling everybody that it's nobody's business how much money his fighters make. Well, it kind of is, because the only people that don't want that out there is the UFC. Everybody wants it out there in the free market but the UFC. So for him to take that side made him look like he's in cahoots with the UFC, and he's wagging his tail at the wrong master. So, this all goes back to, why is this relevant to MMA? Well, in MMA, the stories that are out there, and we'll get into them, but in MMA, in Nevada, when you sign up for a license, you're supposed to fill out an application. And on the application, they ask you, do you have a criminal record? Are you a felon? Are you compliant with your child support? There's all these questions on there that are meant to protect the public and people that are being managed from people that are not doing what society tells them to do, basically following rules and laws. I did a Freedom of Information Act request for this information. So I sent in an actual form and requested Ali's his application, because I had information that he'd lied on. Well, if he didn't lie, then they ignored some pretty serious things on his application. It came back and they said that there was no such document. It didn't exist. So I had his license number. So the question is, when he had that come to Jesus moment with Bob Bennett, where they called him in and said, listen, because of the articles, it was media pressure that did it. The same as I was told by Ray Sefo, it was media pressure that led to them letting him go. When they had that meeting with Bob Bennett and he told him basically to make a decision, how he got a license is beyond me. In what other area of licensure, let's say you go and get a car license, you get pulled over and you don't have a license, you're practicing without a license, you usually get suspended, fined, go to jail. Well, Ali was found for years practicing both as a matchmaker and a manager without a license. No licensure whatsoever. He was taking part in what we look at as illegal deals, like things that benefit him. There's actually bribery clauses in Nevada that he breached. And what they are is that if you don't tell your boss that you're getting special treatment from any of your, the people that you do business with, if you don't disclose it to your boss and it's not approved, then that's a breach of bribery laws. So I got all this and I sent a question to Nevada about it. I'm like, why, how is he licensed? Can you answer this for me? Well, I get an answer back and they're like, thanks for contacting us, but we will not answer any more questions about this applicant to you, which is how? What do you mean you won't answer? Like, my question was, if he didn't fill out an application, how? So that gets to our next part. If you want to maybe kind of discuss what happened with Conor McGregor last week that kind of brought attention to this.
Yeah, so if you weren't watching the press conference where Conor came out in true Conor form, when insane as usual, he showed his crazy genius. And Conor obviously does his homework. Conor talked to you, correct, Mike? At least a little bit.
Yeah, SBG people are aware of my work. I'll say that. Yeah. I don't want to, a girl never tells.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm saying, but through somewhere, he learned some information about Ali. So as he's attacking Khabib, verbally, he brings up, oh, you're terrorist snitch agent, had the whole how's Noah thing. How's Noah? Noah is one of Ali's kids that he left.
Yeah.
He left the mother, and this was not only just the mother, but it was it wasn't a daughter of a high-ranking person in a terrorist militant group that's in the U.S.
No, sorry. Now Noah had no affiliation with that group. Noah's mom actually worked at the OTC. That's where he met her.
Okay, I got that.
So yeah. So Noah was born in '99. So he's 19 now. So he's grown up, but the other kid that you bring up, the 12-year-old that he had while he was basically a member of this group that he was a CI. So people kind of confuse, what a CI is. CIs they don't work for the government. They're like basically just paid to give information.
Yeah,
so he was 100% for about 10 years of his life. All of his money and benefits came from telling on his friends. So anyway, Noah, I wrote about him about 2 years ago, and nobody picked up, nobody bothered, because it was like, it was something that people just didn't want to talk about. It was all the stuff I was writing, because, I was painted like I was some kind of conspiracy theorist. But, I had quoted an NYPD officer in one of my stories. So that's, that would be probably a felony for me to make up something like I'd made up an officer in this story. But people all said, oh, there's no proof, there's no evidence, there's no this, there's no that. So, that was one of the reasons that kind of motivated me to keep going, besides the fact that, it wasn't really personal until there was a personal element when Ali had found out he was trying to spy on me, which was hilarious, because I don't have any skeletons he's going to find. But one of the things he found out was that my job I have a PR degree. So I'm, my background was in PR, but I've been a reporter for 12 years, and I was full time for a lot of years too. And I've worked everywhere. So he's been trying to like defame me by telling everybody that I'm everything from a manager to I'm just a jealous reporter that's trying to make a name off him to, everything. So he's made videos where he's called me, I guess I can say it, he called me a fag in one video when somebody asked him about my work. Ariel asked him about my work. He called me a cockroach and said only 5% of it was true. And, he's been trying all of these tactics to try to throw shade on my work. But it's like, I actually know a couple sources that I've been talking to that he found out I was talking to, and has like reached out, and he's like, hey, do you have any problems with me? Has there been like he's feeling them out to see if I've talked to them, because I've found so many people from his past. But yeah, so Noah was born, and then Ali basically he had a bunch of girlfriends. He just couldn't stay faithful to the mother. So it was his fault that everything kind of broke up. And then he was ordered, just because of paternity and everything else, that he had to pay. It was about $400 or $450. I can't remember. I don't have the number in front of me, but that was based on his salary as a bouncer at a bar at the time in 2000 or 2000. Yeah, around 1999 or 2000. So he stopped paying that for about 12 years. And this was during the time that he was being paid by the government. He just stopped paying that amount of money and stopped seeing the kids. And Noah, he called Noah's family and said, I'm dying overseas. I may never see you again. And then just never spoke to them again. And they Googled him years later, and they found Renzo Gracie's academy with him teaching there. And then they found Dominance. And then so all of these things were like, it was like he was almost thumbing his nose at them. And now that all of this is
at his own child.
Yes. So, and he's got two. So he had Noah that he abandoned basically when he was about 3. And then he had his second child, which was the one that was in this extremist group. And I say terrorist group, and I know that's probably offensive to them, but it was like a cult-like sect that had a spin. And I'm going to I've got a former member of the group that's going to be on the podcast. So they explain all the things that they were into and what they were doing. And that was the problem, was that Ali ran out of things to tell the government, and that's where things kind of went south. But that was his bread and butter. And that was, I'm not going to get into too many deep details, because it's all going to be in the podcast, but I've got green card brides I've found. I've got FBI agents that I've talked to. I've got members of this group. I've got ex-girlfriends that he wrote from prison, and I've got prison letters, and I've got a binder that's got about 300 pages worth of police court documents, everything you can imagine. So because Ali kind of handles everybody's social media. I'm not sure if I was talking to Vinny Magalesh a while ago, but he made me a deal on Twitter. I've still got a screen grab of it, and you guys can call him out publicly because I know he's probably going to lie or make an excuse because he deleted the tweet already. But he said if I could come up with police documents that were certified, he would leave dominance, no questions asked. But he didn't believe me. So I thought maybe it was Ali because Ali actually has been using other people's accounts to communicate with me. He got this one judo guy who was an Olympian, a real Olympian. When Ali lied and said that he was in the Olympics in 96 and then, came here in 97, this kid was 11 or 12. He was, I forget his name. I'll send it to you later. It's something Hafiz. But anyway, Ali, they announced that Dominance was taking over his social media account a month before he communicated to me with his social media account. So I tweeted something about, how I'd found out about his judo background being basically fake. I've got a resume he made up that calls himself a 3-time African Pan Am champion, which is geographically impossible. There's no such thing. Yeah. So he made it up, and he's actually got it on a couple of the videos online. He's got that. He was introduced at the Gracie Challenge as their African Pan Am champion that he was representing. And it's how he got away with it for so long is just crazy to me because his lies were I found articles and proof that he had 3 different ages that he said he competed at the Olympics at over different times. But the problem has always been, ironically enough, that he was able early on to manipulate the media. That's what happened with this book that he contributed to. He found this, I'm going to say the guy that wrote the book. The reason why people are dismissing my work is that the book that I first quoted was written by a Christian extremist, I guess you could say, a guy that was kill all Muslims type of thing. He's not quite that bad, but this guy he doesn't like the Muslim religion whatsoever, and he has zero tolerance for anybody but Christianity. So Ali reached out to this guy because he was desperate because he was going to be deported. So he reached out to him because his handler at the time, the guy that was the one that paid him and got info from him and everything like that, he heard him talking on the phone to this author asking him for copies of these tapes that he'd gotten from a source of terror, not terrorist, but paramilitary training. So Ali cataloged that info, and when he needed it months later, he remembered this Christian author's name or looked it up, called him up, and between the two of them, they put their heads together and figured out what this guy's real name was, the detective. So Ali was calling this guy's elderly mother. There were threats basically to his family that they felt as his family was threatened. And I found this guy and I quoted him in one of my stories. All he would say, he said, I can't talk to you because he said I could go to jail. So he said, I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. And he said, but the one thing I will tell you, and this is something that changed the course of my story, which is why I took my original stories down because I fact-checked them. But he said, anything he tells you, he actually said, I don't know if you'll ever get a chance to interview him or not, if he'll let you do it. But he said, anything he tells you, fact-check it because he will say whatever it takes to either get himself out of trouble or to make himself look better. And I was I kind of took that okay, great. Thanks for the advice. But literally everything that I've fact checked that he told that author, 90% of it is either a half truth or just totally bull. And that's what he was doing with the NYPD. And that's what he was doing with, so many portions of his life, everybody. I'm not even sure that he knows who he is right now. I really believe that he's got, this image for himself. That's the other thing. These kids, so Noah, all this happens with Connor. Connor shouts that out, and people start going nuts. Who's Noah? Who's Noah? Who's Noah? So the information is already out there from an old story. So I posted who he was. Well, magically enough, through the power of the internet, Ali's other son has been in touch with Noah, and they're sharing stories now, and they connected for the first time in their lives. And he's like, wow, I've got a brother. And he knew about him, but it was they never connected. But they're connecting over these stories of Ali, basically using them as pawns. And that's exactly what the younger son was. It got him close to the leadership of the group that he was in. And there were the NYPD were like shocked when he told them that he wanted to marry and have a baby with this girl, because they're like, are you like, we don't condone this. It was actually like a big deal. Like they were like, no, like that's like almost like crossing the line. He had to sign a waiver, like a contract, saying that we in no way wanted you to do this. But with Ali, anything that he can do to get in the good books of the people that are in charge, he will do.
What he wants.
That's exactly what it is. And I've done, people talk about like how much research I've done. Over the last 3 years, I've talked to psychologists, and I've kind of pinned down the kind of mental disorder that, I would say, judging by what I had a questionnaire that I had everybody that knew him fill out, and let's just say it all came back saying the same thing. And there's a genetic disposition for this specific mental disorder that I'll talk about more on the podcast, that is like, basically he has no empathy, and he's got, there's like zero guilt and blames others. And there are all these things that I'm just like, it was like a eureka moment for everybody that knew him. And that's, people don't understand. I've talked to a lot of these sources for going on 3 years. And, I wouldn't say, people would probably say it would be disingenuous to say that I'm friends with some of them, but like we've gotten very friendly. Like we talk about, like anything, if it's something, but the crazy part is that there's been this process with all of them that they've been like, oh my God, because they never had all the pieces of the puzzle. He always had 3 lives, always carried 3 cell phones, always had, you know what I mean? It was like he kept certain parts of his life away from everybody. And that's what the podcast is going to go into. It's going to detail all of these 3 different lives that he was, or at least 2 at every point from his time coming to America until now. And it's nothing that he portrayed himself to be is reality. And it's, people don't want to believe it, I think, because it doesn't seem like it's real. Like it's such a crazy, in-depth, difficult to process story that I think that's why, for me, putting it in a podcast in a way that I could tell it in chapters that are easily digestible. And, I'm going to put out the police docs with everything as like an accompaniment. While you're listening, you can read through and look through it. It's going to be like nothing in MMA. And I think that's the other reason why maybe people are being, reluctant to give it a chance. But I think, and I know I'm biased, I think it's going to be something that's like going to shock a lot of people. And it's going to be something that's hopefully changes the way that we look at journalism.
Oh, I definitely think you're right there. And I mean, Ali came here in 96 or 97.
Actually, yeah, 97. It was, yeah. And that's the thing about if that Fuqra file site, ironically enough, the one that you quoted, I actually was hired to curate that. I helped build that website they hired me like based on my Ali investigation. They were so impressed with all the stuff I knew. I had binders by this point and police documents from like everywhere about this group, and had been tracking them. So I impressed them, and they hired me like on the spot for about 6 months to set that website up. I was like their expert on that. I was writing like Senate documents and stuff on these groups and stuff. So the problem is that after I left, they added a lot of stuff to Ali's page because they saw that I was kind of getting some shine with some of my stuff. So a lot of it is either not true, or it's, there's stuff in there that I can say is definitely false about him. So yeah, he came in 97, which they'll probably update, and it'll be, they're probably listening as soon as this goes up. So
yeah. I mean, the thing is, he was obviously born into a life from what I've been told by people that are close to him. Like, you can't hate him because he was born into this. Yeah, I can. Okay, because the guy has come to this country under false pretense, under lies. He shows up to the Olympic Training Center when my coach was there. Yep. And he's lied, and it's all documented. He played our government, the NYPD, the FBI. He played the Muslims of America extremist group. They have the Muslim Boy Scouts of America, which is also an extremist group.
He was teaching them.
He was teaching these kids or people how to fight, how to protect themselves. The list goes on and on. This guy is such a snake. He's played both sides. He's played everybody. And like you said, I highly doubt he even knows who he is anymore. I don't think he's ever known, because everything has been a lie. From the informant stuff to him, playing favorites in these, and mind you, he wasn't just some peon in these extremist groups. Okay, you can call them extremist groups or terrorist groups, whatever, doesn't matter. He was a high-ranking right-hand man for some of the leaders of these things, if I'm not wrong, correct?
Yeah, he actually, the leader of North America is this guy called Hussein Adams. His dad actually was one of their most prolific hit team members. He actually ran a hit squad that was like across the world. Like they did like bombings in like Trinidad and, murders and assassinations across North America, basically. They actually planned a bombing here in Toronto in 91. And this might be my second, my next project might be a book or something on this, because I've dug so deeply into this one, because it was probably their worst attack. But it was a bomb plot that got thwarted in 91 that would have killed more people than 9/11. And it was, it was chilling. It was chilling. I was actually talking to a member of this group tonight, and I was sharing some of the info, and he knew about a lot of the stuff, but he was shocked by some of the stuff that I told him from some of these police documents about how they were planning these things. Like one line was in the actual bomb plans, like how they were setting it up, that had, basically all their hit teams, their guard teams, their recon teams. They were doing it like military type strikes. What they said was the bombing was supposed to happen in India, or sorry, not in India, in Little India in Toronto. So like, think of like, New York City, where they've got like, Little Italy, basically it's just like a regular community. And it's, just happens to be that there's a lot of shops that are of, Indian shops, Indian food, but like people shop there that aren't Indian all the time. Right, like it's like people go there for food. People, maybe have a loft there. Like it's inhabited by a lot of
delicious and
Indian, and it's not like just for Indians. So they in this plan for this bombing, they wrote, this Barry Adams wrote that this location is very heavily populated by Hindus and Indians, which was their sheikh in Pakistan that was the enemy of him. So all these black converts took up the fight of their sheikh in Pakistan, who had problems with all these different religious groups for personal reasons. So they were basically duped into this. So this guy wrote this manifesto of how they were going to do the bombing, and said, if there are people that are killed that are not of Indian or Hindu descent, basically, we will just chalk them up. They not this terminology, but he said we will consider them friends of Hindus and Indians, and basically like they didn't care then. But the crazy part about it, the one theater that they had planned to put these time bombs in, it was attached to a public library, and the time that it would have gone off, it would have been heavily populated, and there would have been children in it. So they were saying that between these two coordinated attacks that got thwarted, that kind of it was almost the impetus of this group getting not shut down, but they had to go kind of more secretive with a lot of their things, because they found out their modus operandi, and it got broken up. It's a whole big story we'll get into a little bit more, but yeah, that's he didn't care that there were going to be children, and this was a guy that had kids of his own. So his son took over the leadership in North America because his dad went to jail for 12 years and was unable to do it. So the debt that they owed him, basically, because he also gave away his 13-year-old Canadian daughter to this 43-year-old sheik at the time to have children, which is illegal. Like there's so many different layers to this story that just make me mad, because it's even the ex-member that I speak to is talking about how cultish they are. And he's like, they're definitely a cult, 100% a cult. So they would do anything. There were these poor extremists that were living on these compounds. So Ali was able to fool them because he was flashing the money around that he was getting to put away members. Like systematically, he would put one away because he was involved with a lot of the crimes that he was putting them away for, or the people that he was putting away. So he already had a knowledge of everything they were doing because he was working with them. Like he was part of these schemes. So it was there's so many layers to what he was doing, and how duplicitous he was to everybody. So he had his Olympic training center friends. He had his group, this criminal organization, terrorist organization friends. And he had, other friends in different areas that he was kind of going and seeing, and nobody quite knows what was going on. But the scariest part that goes back to MMA is that he was sleeping at one time on Greg Jackson's couch while he was a CI in this group. Yeah. He was having people visit him in New York, like GSP, and stay at his apartment that was frequented by some of these murderers and terrorists. And he was warned repeatedly to keep away from people like GSP and Greg
Warned
Jackson.
by the FBI.
Warned. They would say, don't bring these people to your apartment because of how dangerous it is. And time and time again, he would do it anyway. So he actually brought Greg Jackson with him to Egypt while he was working there. And you've probably read about the him failing the lie detector test. That was what it was about. And I'm going to get into that story in the podcast as well. But that story is crazy. Like you listen to it and you listen to the way that the one NYPD intelligence detective that I'm talking to, none of his handlers would talk to me because they're so terrified of, not terrified, but they said, we don't really care about him anymore. Why would we want to go to prison for him to be able to get the last laugh? So that, they won't do it. But I found one that was not one of his handlers that was in the room for certain things that he's got firsthand knowledge of. And I'll tell you, man, some of these stories that you hear, you talk about people like, being like proud Americans and working for the government. He was working against the government. He was actively working against the government. So that's the other part that people don't understand. They're like, well, a lot of his supporters will say he was a hero. He did so much. No, he just took the government for a ride. He took money, taxpayers' money. And he should have been deported because I've got a rap sheet on him that is longer than you can even imagine with all the crimes that he had been committing, that he basically made most of them go away because of deals he made. So it's there are a lot of layers that we'll go through, and it's hard for me because I'm not sure what people know and how much I've already revealed. And, I know so much that like people, when I'm talking to them, will go, well, who's this? Who's that? I just assume, because I know who they all are. The problem is I have to make it digestible for everybody else. But anybody that says that I haven't done my research or I haven't done my diligence or I don't have documents or proof is going to be probably in for a very rude awakening when the podcast comes out.
I mean, with the amount of information that you have shared with me daily since we've been chatting is insane. I mean, there's so much fuckery going on with this guy. He has been playing everyone for his own benefit since he got here in the 90s. And people try and stick up for him and say, oh, well, obviously they didn't read the article properly or they're too stupid to figure it out. Sure, you know what? Yeah, he snitched on a few guys, got a few bad people put away. But he also let a lot of bad guys off the hook, I'm sure. And this was all for his own benefit. The guy is a snake. Not only are you you came into this as a terrorist against this nation, against our beautiful nation, but on top of it, you turn snitch on your own people. You're lower than them. At least they have a fucking cause. At least they have something to fight for. Sure, it's against us. In our eyes, it's wrong. But at least they're stuck to something. You know what I mean? He is just a chameleon weaving his way through life and just profiting hand over fist. The guy makes a lot of money. The guy has world champions like Khabib, and it's mind blowing to think of how much wool he's pulled over everybody's eyes and is still doing so. I don't understand how people can deal with this, especially in light of all the information that's coming out.
Well, yeah, and the thing is now that the info is actually coming out again. Like I said, it's mostly a lot of it's recycled, but I'm hoping that people will start asking questions. I've already had a few reporters reach out to me to say that they're going to try to press Nevada and say, hey, what's going on here? Why won't you answer questions about Ali? All we want is a direct question. Did he fill out an application? And if he did, how did he answer these questions? If he answered them properly, then we don't have an issue. But when I found Noah, and I found him, it was 2000 and I'm going to say 16 because I wrote about him in 2016. So back then, when I first found him, Ali was about 12 years behind and hadn't seen or spoken to him in 12 years and had an order that was defunct. So it was so since I started talking to them and I started writing about it and revealing it, Ali has gone and dealt with it only because he was forced to or compelled to because of public pressure. But he actually went and had his monthly payment lowered. So instead of paying the $400 to $450, this manager that boasts that he's got athletes that he manages, 50 in the UFC, and he actually boasted that his guys make the most money, and will probably make, I don't know how much Khabib makes, but let's say Khabib makes anywhere from 2 to 4 million for this fight. He takes 10%. So if he owes 40 to 50 grand to one kid for child support and probably about the same amount to the other one, then that should be something that Nevada should compel him to do to be able to maintain his license. Because the other thing Nevada's, I doubt, doing is they're supposed to take in fight contracts between licensed managers and fighters in their jurisdiction. So any fight contract that Ali has that has terms should be given to them to sign and to stamp. So if they're not doing all of this and there are issues going on with that, we're starting to bring to light, like how did this guy get licensed, then they need to be held accountable. I don't understand how they can do this. Edmonton tried the same thing with me for about 2 or 3 years. I had, stuff like they were letting tampered gloves go and, weight class differences that shouldn't have been allowed. And before Tim Hag, and they refused to talk to me. They kept basically like discounting me because they said I wasn't a credible source because they called me a blog. It doesn't matter that I used to write, for the Fight Network and Fox Sports and Yahoo Sports and, all these different sites, every magazine out there. It doesn't really matter. It just matters what your URL is to some people. So they, my story in Edmonton actually got the executive director fired because I found out he wasn't registering all the medical suspensions. There's actually going to be a multi-million-dollar lawsuit coming up about Tim Hag's wrongful death against him and other people. And he may actually go to jail, which was the title of my story that came out over a year ago, said, should he go to jail for criminal negligence causing death? And now I'm told they are finally looking into that because of all the evidence that was brought out because of, I say it was because of me. People will deny that it was because of me, but the actual person that was responsible was running the investigation into Tim Hag's death before I put the brakes on it with my story. So they actually brought a third party in to do it, and they started finding all the other stuff that I've been talking about. All of the stuff was there. They're like, oh my God, so all of a sudden he gets fired. Nobody announces why he's fired or where he's gone. He's been there for like 8 years protected by the city. So anybody that says, oh yeah, well, you can't affect change, I beg to differ because these people come around when mainstream media helped with the lifting. So in Edmonton, I had all these national outlets contact me that they wanted to help tell my story. So CTV told it. We had a bunch of like sports stations. They helping like for them to come in and help with the heavy lifting actually helped motivate Edmonton to do the right thing. So that's the thing about journalism. Like people think like, oh, this is just punching in the face, and this is, let's talk about fight rumors. Let's talk about all the topics that are tired and everybody talks about. Well, there's no reason why there can't be guys like me and Karim and even Stephen Morocco's a guy that I think doesn't get enough credit. There are other guys that do stories like this, but they're hindered by who they write for. So, that's the biggest takeaway from all of this is that I'm hoping that it changes the way that we look at journalism. And we start looking at the fact is that, number one, if you're a reporter, your primary responsibility is talking about what's in the public's interest. And this is what this is. The problem is I saw a quote today, and I'm going to use it in one of my future pieces by a reporter who's probably got as much experience as anyone. And he said, is it news if we say it's news, or is it news if the public is interested in it? So he took the actual tenet of journalism that says if it's in the public's interest, meaning that it's in the public's best interest to know this, it protects the public to know this. And he spun it to what most people that don't understand what public interest is, and they say it's what the public is interested in, which is a total skew of what it is. So a lot of these sites then, by his admission, are pandering to what the public is interested in because of clicks. So that's why we're reading all of these stories that you wouldn't even care to read unless you had some time to waste on the toilet. But that's the biggest takeaway from this, is that I'm hoping that we're going to start some conversations like this one about people in the sport, because I know we're all close and we're all in the same pool, and you got to meet up with people, and some people are intimidating to certain people. But when there's a crowd of people saying, hey, if there's something wrong here, then people are going to have to listen.
Yeah, and to eradicate this sport and this country of some filth like Ali is exactly what needs to happen. This is about cleaning this up. This guy does not deserve what he has. He is a snake. He's a bad person. I mean, there's rumors that he's tied to murder. I mean, there's rumors he's tied to all kinds of crazy things. You know, like, I mean, there's so much information that I've learned lately, and it blows my mind that the guy is still able to function. That he's still alive. I mean, he screwed over so many people, even his own people, even the extremist Muslims. You know, that I'm really shocked that this dude is still alive. It's crazy, and again, rumor from what I've heard that he does have a bounty on his head.
Yep.
And it wouldn't surprise me. Those guys don't fuck around. These extremist groups they're very extreme. They will kill you. Obviously they've shown that their capabilities, and it's just wild, man. I mean, I can't get it out of my head to think that this guy's been able to get away with this stuff since the 90s, man. I mean, it's been so long, since he was a teenager, and it's so gross. So, yeah. I commend you. Like I've told you before, you are doing the right thing. You're doing the right work. And for someone like Ariel Helwani or whoever else, the biggest names in our sport as far as journalism goes, to put you off and to say they can't, to basically just tell you to fuck off, like, that's gross. Yeah. That is disgusting. So shame on everybody. Like, you're causing too much issues. No, man. No, I'm not. I'm bringing to light some truth, and at least finally, you're getting your dues. I've talked to guys like Brendan Schaub. I know Rogan knows about this material now. And people are learning, and I mean, I use the word pray very loosely, but I pray so much that this guy gets sent back to where he came from, because there's some people there that I'm sure want to talk to him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've heard rumors, and again, just rumors, but I've heard from some sources that haven't been wrong before, that there are things that are going on behind the scenes as far as investigations go. And I have been contacted by some federal agencies, three-letter federal agencies, to ask some questions. I've been interviewed twice by one in particular, and I've heard some stories and read some things in some of the reports I have from some of the background check services that I use that make me wonder if something's going on. I thought maybe when they responded back to me from Nevada that was an indicator that maybe they were looking into something, because they didn't just send me back the email saying thanks for your email. They CC'd it to their to the Attorney General's office. So wow. I thought, well, maybe there's something going on there, right? So I took that as a key, and I started sending the Attorney General's office all of the documents that I had, the criminal documents, and he's got on his record that I was able to obtain through regular channels that's certified for Vinny Magalesh when he wants it. He's a felon. And he's a felon with a fraud record, and it's an identity fraud record. So he's got that, and he's got some financial fraud record as well on his record. And the charges that he actually had that were let go, I've got all the police docs proving that he was involved with them. They were just let go because he made these deals with the government. So he had, he probably was looking at least a decade, maybe more, in jail from everything that he was doing, and immediate deportation. He was, because of the Patriot program, or the Patriot Act. Yeah. He was going, and this was just after 9/11. There are 9/11 links to this too. So there are, everybody says
he was supposed to be on a flight on 9/11.
Yeah, correct? He was booked on one, and I've got an interview with the girl that he used to perpetuate his identity while he was booked on that flight, and I've got her story too. Her story is probably one of the most chilling out of all of them. She was forced to run from not only the government in America that was looking for them, She was also forced to run from the Egyptian government that was looking for them. So this is like, again, it's one of those stories that people say, this is too crazy to be true. No, it's true, but it's like sometimes the truth in a lot of these matters is stranger than fiction, because it reminds me of like a Coen Brothers movie or something, because there's so many people and so many elements to it. There are people in this story that they could have their own story. And that's the thing about it. There are people that could have like a documentary written on just their portion of the story. But that's how many layers there are to this story and how many people are linked to it. Like it's a vast story, but I'm as excited. I think that's the other reason I stuck with it, was because I'm like, man, this is like the story of a lifetime. Not like I'm like, wow, this is going to be like in for me. I'm just like, who would turn down this story? Who would walk away from this story?
How could you?
People in this terrorist group. And, everybody says that, it's funny because I get where he's trying to pull this out of. Back like years and years ago, but 2011, I worked for a company called Fundifighter. And that was where I was working for the guy that owned it actually had a management group and stuff. And that's where I first learned about Ali, because he started sending me all these documents from like, TriStar guys that he had been trying to poach. And, I have actual emails because we were helping Rick Hahn at the time get sponsors, because he had no sponsors. And Ali was trying to like pretend he was his manager at the time and screwed up his Bellator deal a little bit by trying to like force him that he said he was going to sign him with World Series of Fighting if they didn't pay him more the week of the Chandler fight. The week of. He was going to pull him out of the fight, he said. And that was how he was doing business. So they actually threatened to sue Ali and World Series of Fighting for tampering. But Rick Hahn passed on this document to me, and he actually asked me, he said, does this seem like an okay deal to you? And the way I read through it, I was like, wait a minute here. There were so many moving parts that I'm trying to think now who it was. There were two Polish fighters, Michael Materla and Jan Blachowicz, which I don't know if you guys remember. Jan Blachowicz had all kinds of problems with World Series of Fighting where they basically benched him. Yeah. Part of the reason they benched him was because Ali's ego got so angry that this deal fell through with this guy that was supposed to give him a sponsorship for Rick, that he held him personally responsible and took it out on his fighters. And that was kind of like what he did back then. He was like, he'd sit guys out, or he'd, not answer the phone when they called. So this deal and I wrote about this too. And again, nobody talked about it. I don't know why, you'd think it would be newsworthy. The deal hinged on, and even in the deal, they're negotiating more and more money. And Ali was giving inflated contracts to Blachowicz and Materla's manager, who ran a business in Poland, and he was going to kick the difference over to Rick Hahn. And he even said that. He goes, if you don't pay me this much, then I can't sponsor Rick. If you do, then I can sponsor him. So he was paying himself and Rick basically with World Series of Fighting money, because he was the one that was paying the sponsorship. So, there are all these things that are like, people are like, how is this related to MMA? Well, he built his business illegally through all of these shady practices. So I had all this information way back then, but I'd stepped away from journalism to take this job because I have 5 kids and I have a family. And I was like, you know what, I'll go back to using my PR degree. Held on to it. 2 years later, I'm hearing, all this stuff about Ali through different channels. And I look, because everybody knew that I had this file that I'd been, collecting info, and talked to World Series of Fighting. And they told me he was on his last straw. And so they're like, did you read this story? And I go and read the story by Paul and John. And I'm like, holy shit, like somebody's actually doing what I was trying to do like 4 or 5 years ago. So I reached out to them and offered them all my info, and ended up that they didn't want it. So I'm like, how my story came about is crazy. I'm like, okay, so you see on Twitter, I don't kind of back down to anybody. I get a bad reputation, I guess, for maybe being too aggressive when people are assholes. So I like to, and I did the same thing with Edmonton for like, I did Edmonton about a year. I actually left Yahoo Sports because they wouldn't let me write legitimate pieces and wanted me to kind of, contribute to clickbait. So I opened my website to write a story about Cody McKenzie getting screwed by Edmonton. They basically breached laws and rules to suspend him. So I was doing this way before Ali. Everybody's like, you started your website, your career with Ali. I'm like, I've done this for 12 years. This isn't like my first day here. Like I've written for a lot of outlets. People may have just heard of me. So I'm like, I did the exact same thing with Edmonton. We were, he was feeding information through different people that was false. And I was, putting like tweeting at him that I wanted an interview and all, it was like a cat and mouse game, like a detective and a criminal. So I started doing the same thing with Ali, and some people liked it, some people didn't. They're like, "Oh, you're unprofessional." Even my peers were saying that, "Oh, it seems personal and you're going after him." And I'm like, "No, it's just my style." So he actually tweeted at me indirectly that it was something about me being a loser. I'm trying to think of what it was. It was, "Oh, stop obsessing over me and go worry about taking care of your family," because he'd had this one guy do some intel and he'd found out that I had lost my marketing job that I had. My contract had ended, and I was moving furniture because I have 5 kids. So I've got a degree, an honors degree. I was on like the board of my PR program, and he's a guy that basically came here and stole everything that he's gotten and doesn't take care of his kids. I didn't know it at the time that he wasn't taking care of his kids, but he called me a loser and told me to go take care of my family. And I'm like, now that I read that, I'm like, that's sad. It's sad that that's your life, right? Like it's like I feel bad for people like that can't be who they are. But in Ali's case, with everything else in his life and whatever it is, it's like you're not who you are. Like like I said, I'm not sure that he knows who he is. So in a lot of ways, I feel bad for him. And he has said to Noah's parents or through Noah that he thinks that they're jealous of him and all this stuff. And it's like, no, they're just kind of upset that you just were never a part of this kid's life. And that you never bothered to pay anything that you're owing. And now he's going to be like 30 before he gets the money that was owed to him by the time he was 18, because Ali's like saying that he's got no income. So he's had the payment reduced to $300. He made an offer to Noah's mother, like through Noah, that he would pay him like a percentage of what he owes, but only if he makes sure that his mother never touches it. And keep in mind, his mother has done nothing. She tried to make the relationship work through everything. And I've got police reports on that too, on certain things about that are like very telling of the situation and the type of person that he was. It's sad. There's a lot of victims in this story, but with con men and with people with the kind of mental things that I think Ali has going on, according to the experts that I've spoken to, that border in, if you look up what's called the dark triad of traits, it's not that he can't help it, but he's predisposed to act like this. But I mean, it comes to a certain point where you just kind of, you need to try to fix what's right. And he never has. And he had an interview actually with Ariel Helwani that you guys have probably seen, where he called me names and denied everything, said it was only 5% true. Twice in that, like it was a rehearsed speech. And how I know, like why I think it was a rehearsed speech was because as soon as Ariel asked him about me, if you rewind to that part, he said, "I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Mike Russell, about his work." And Ali started answering the question before. That's how thrown off he was that Ariel actually asked him that question. And he says, "Well, everybody knows World Series of Fighting and blah." And then he goes into his predetermined rant about me, about being a cockroach and that you just let a cockroach go by. He had already come up with that story. And then he went on and looked at the camera and said, "Everything I've done in my past, I'm proud of. And anything I haven't done anything that I have done that I'm not proud of, I've always issued a public apology for." So, I've got a list of things and a list of victims that will probably have to prove otherwise just by all of the things that he's done and never, ever, ever gotten amends for. It's, I don't know. I think part of the reason that has motivated me the last little while is not just with the Connor thing, but the last year or two has been that I know that there are kids involved. Like I said, I'm a father of 5, and I do whatever I can to take care of my kids. And I guess that's maybe where we're different, is that, this is how I am compared to how he is. But, there are a lot of victims in this. And I think that's the main reason I think the story needs to get out, is just because it's been therapeutic for them. I was actually speaking to one of his victims tonight, and they said, "Man, I can't believe," and they all think it's them. They all say, "Oh, I can't believe I was fooled. I can't believe this is what was really," and, totally shocked, and different visions of what they thought life was with Ali. And then when they're reading through police documents and talking to other victims and other people and putting pieces together, it's like, wow. It's like it's like a Ponzi scheme that one person put on that has different levels to it and different elements and different people. And it's a very complex case of a person that I think is just, has issues that have, he can't help himself. Same with like people said about like with the Connor thing. Like I told you, I had been in communication at certain points with members of SBG about my stories, and there were some questions asked and everything else. I didn't think Connor was going to say anything, but I did make a comment to somebody that I said, I don't know though, because Ali can't help himself by injecting himself into these types of situations. And right at the last minute, it's like Connor had it right on his hip. And he, came out with what he said about him being, you're a mad terrorist, snitch, rat, and then it was as he was walking away, it came to him and he just said, how's Noah? Because I, through the grapevine, heard that that's a major issue in Ireland. Deadbeat dads are, you know what I mean? You're as bad of a criminal as anything in Ireland. And I think that's probably why when that hit Connor's ears, he picked up on it, right? Like, and say what you want about Connor, like he's a family man, right? I don't know the dynamic, but in public at least, he's a very staunch defender of his family, and when you hear something like that, like that's a big deal. That's a big deal, especially when there are steps being taken, I think, to hide his income and to change, reality from what he's making, and there's a lot going on, I think, to this story that people don't realize that that's a big deal. You do that in any other, like if I worked in construction and I had a government paycheck, they could garnish my wages and, like seize my driver's license. But because this all happened in Colorado and the other child that he has is in New York, he lives in Nevada, which is, that's basically where criminals go to hide. So he, I don't know. I don't know how he's hidden in plain sight for so long, because he had an ankle bracelet on while he was training at Henzo Gracie's, and they lied and said it was a heart monitor, right? So he's been helped. He's been helped along the way. And that's the thing. Everybody's like, do you think so-and-so knows? I'm like, everybody that knows, and everybody that doesn't want to know, doesn't want to know. Because Ali instantly blocked me with every single Twitter account that he had because he didn't want the truth to come out, right? And I haven't said anything false or inflammatory or not based on facts. And everybody that was saying, well, there's no real evidence like for these last few years. Well, one of the reasons why people were afraid to talk about him, people that like, I've got some people that have had to change their names for the story because they don't know what he's capable of, they said. I have other people that were afraid, like NYPD guys, because of what happened. Him actually calling the NYPD. He actually tried to get me in trouble too, and was telling like other reporters that Homeland's going to get me when I come and stuff. And I'm like, he's playing it off still like he was an actual 007 agent. And that's what World Series of Fighting knew about him for years. 2014, somebody sent them a clip of that book that he was in and that he contributed to. There was a video on Fox News that he was like, basically a picture was brought up. I think I showed it to you. Mm-hmm. Somebody sent it to World Series of Fighting, and the execs all got in a room and watched it, and it was dead silence. They said you could hear a pin drop. And then they all piped up, well, what are we going to do? They were worried that there might be a bombing at one of their events because they put two and two together and started looking into this group, but they did nothing. They did nothing about it. One executive, and I know of only one that actually approached Ali about it, and we'll get into that on the podcast again. All the things that he told him, some of them are chilling, some of them seem like they might be lies. Others were just him pumping his own tires by saying he was, he used a line with Ariel where he said, I don't know, these people trying to make me out to be a 007. Well, when he talked to other people, he basically said he was 007. He actually told the author of that book, yeah, I guess I'm kind of like 007. So, con men are very good. Like, you probably know some used car salesmen. You probably know some like really good defense lawyers. You probably know poker players that are really good, right? These are all, I'll tell you, it's psychopathy. That's what they're related to. They don't have the ability to show remorse. They don't have the ability that their brains are actually different, and a lot of the chemistry of their body through some of the stuff that they have, and it's hard to kind of go into and grasp it all, but they cannot help themselves. One thing they never do is they never really have an attachment to anybody, but the main thing is they hate to lose, completely hate to lose, and they hate to have to say sorry. They never say it unless it's going to get them something that they need. They'll never really, people like that don't, if you've ever seen a movie where you start getting tears in your eyes, they don't get that, but they do for public appearance. So Ali has a very duplicitous side, I think, that like a lot of people that knew him better than me, that took those psychopathy tests, that went through and said, yes, every one of them was unanimous. They're like, Every single answer was the same. He was so high on the test that some of the experts that I spoke to said they've never seen anything like that. And they said, I wish we could scan his brain because we'd be able to tell a lot more about him. But that's the problem. People are like, he seems like a good guy to me. He's always nice to me. He's always great to me. Well, that's because he needs something from you. If it's not money, it's you can help his credibility, or maybe he could use you, that you're a buddy of his, that you'll vouch for him on the internet when these stories come out, right? So everybody is a pawn to people like this, and it's hard to believe that people even that are close to them don't realize that, because the danger he's put these people in. The fact that I've heard there is a credible bounty out on his life, and not only just a bounty out on his life by the group, his Islamic father-in-law, which I've also done research on, and was involved with some gun crime, shootouts with police and that sort of thing in Brooklyn before he converted. He chased Ali around and was very close to killing him. And again, that's a story we'll get into in the podcast. But this is, there are reports on these things. These aren't made up stories. And there are people that witnessed him telling the story. And I've got the other side telling very similar stories. But it's been exhausting. The hardest part about it all, about this whole story, and everybody's like, oh, why is it taking so long? It's been cutting through the bullshit, because 90% of what is out there, he fed out there to this author and to all these different people. Just one thing to end on for this point. I don't know if we've got any time left, but he actually did an interview with a mainstream newspaper in 2003. Spent almost 2 years in jail, got out, and in prison. He was in jail, then federal prison. Got out and did this interview ahead of one of his fights. I think it might have been one of the ones he lost, because he's only like 1 win, 3 losses, all by submission, which a judo Olympian usually doesn't get tapped that easily.
Yeah, especially with arm bars. It's one of the main things judo guys do.
Arm bars and rear naked chokes. Yeah, that was his other move. He bounced at a bar, and how he basically created this like image of fear was that he would, when guys were drunk and acting up or mouthy, he would be the guy that would sneak up and choke them unconscious and drop them on their heads outside. And he'd do it in front of the lineup so that everybody saw it. So he got a reputation for being a guy you didn't mess with, because he was taking advantage of, again, if it's true about him buying drinks for the UFC matchmakers and sitting, I hope he's not making deals while he's sitting there at the bar that people have, texted me images and told me about. I'm hoping that's not the case, but that was his MO back then, was that he'd take advantage of drunk people. But, there's so many layers to what he's done. So he told this reporter, sat down with her, and he told her that he was an Olympic champion. He wasn't just an Olympian. He was an Olympic champion. And this was, everybody's like, well, how could... The internet in 2001 was like, you had AOL and you had message boards. You didn't have Judo Inside that you could go to, which is like the Sherdog Fight Finder of judo, and look up if he competed under any of the like 12 aliases that I have, American and otherwise. I've looked them all up. Said that he competed at all these, that he was going to be in the 96 Olympics. Now he's changed it to he didn't make weight. And with that judo guy from Egypt that was an Olympian, he's now changed it with his account to try to tell me that he was an alternate. Well, you can't be an alternate if you didn't make the team. And to make the team, you have to win a certain amount of points from qualifying tournaments. So he didn't compete in any qualifying tournaments. So he told this girl that he was this woman is like, everybody that says, oh, these MMA reporters got duped by Ali. This woman was like just starting out, and she tried to tell me that it was an entertainment story, so she didn't really fact check it. But he told her he was at 16, he was the youngest Olympian in Egyptian history, and that he was a judo champion, and that he had all these stories. And the one that got me, that just made me think, oh, I need to do a bigger story on this, was he told her that he was arrested, and this was, I think, maybe to cover the fact that he was missing so much, or maybe people heard he was in jail. He said he got arrested a bunch of times after 9/11 because of Islamophobia. He actually blamed Islamophobia, even though the reasons he got arrested were his crimes. And he was booked on a 9/11 flight. He tried to turn it around and create this like hysteria almost that there's Islamophobia is causing like the cops in Colorado Springs to pick him up. It's like seriously, like that's it, man. Like that's him telling me I'm a deadbeat dad for taking care of my kids, and he's the guy that's the deadbeat. Everything that he says, like the NYPD told me, and all of the NYPD officers that I spoke to were part of the intelligence division, which was like their FBI. They had clandestine powers where they could go anywhere. Like apparently they have people here in Toronto. They have people all over the world. But they were given these powers because of 9/11. They basically created this like super police force because they're like, F these terrorists. We're gonna do something about it. So they were desperate when they found Ali, and they found out he had ties to this group, and maybe was somehow tied to 9/11. And the details in that one are pretty, like, if it's a coincidence, it's a crazy coincidence. Some of the things that he did and said and that were happening, like even the fact that the main hijacker from 9/11 was Egyptian. And he had, they all had fake ID, and they were all training in the U.S. and everything else. There are a lot of crazy similarities and questions that make you say, well, we have to talk about it. We can't just ignore it. We can't do what John Morgan said that he can't even ask because he doesn't have proof and he doesn't want to be. You got to ask these questions. You can't just sit back and hope that somebody's not going to be mad at you. But the problem is we are in an access-based journalism news cycle. And if you don't have access, then people discount you like they do, the fact that I'm not sitting front row at UFC events. They think that I'm, some lesser journalist when I'm actually probably able to do more from Toronto than most of the people that are right inside the action see it up front. So I don't know, man. It's amazing to me to see how everything has unfolded in the last little while, because I've been, sitting here going, wonder if anybody's ever going to notice it, right? So with Conor doing what he did, I don't think that it could have happened any better. So now's the time. Now's the time to put out the podcast and to tell the truth about everything that I know.
Yeah, and then that's why I wanted you on, because as I said before, me talking shit was just me talking shit. I was just being silly. Yeah. But the more information I heard, and whether it's true or false, I mean, there's obviously going to be some things that we read that aren't true. But maybe we should ask Colby Covington. Trump. Hit Trump up. Tell him this story. Get this motherfucker kicked out of here. He does not belong here. He shouldn't be able to grace this beautiful country, this free country. We take in all kinds of people. Just there's so many things that makes this country great. And someone like that is just poisoning the well for everybody else. Yeah. And again, going back to the sport that I love, you're making that look bad. And you're representing, and again, nothing against Khabib, nothing against Muslims. I have great Muslim friends I've traveled the world with. I've read, the Book of Islam. I've done my due diligence. I'm not stupid, and I just feel that, man, this is not right, and it needs to be fixed. It has to be fixed, and it has to be fixed now. And with a voice like Conor has, with the soapbox that he has, I mean, that shed a lot of light on for a lot of people to open their eyes, and it was perfect. It was kind of the perfect time for all this to come out, and I'm excited to just see where it goes.
Yeah, we don't know what's next, right? Like I don't think Ali has the ability to just keep his mouth shut through fight week, which is he's becoming a distraction. That's the part about it that, like, Conor just played him with like 4 words, 5 words, or however many words he used. And Ali now has become the focus, right? So he can just sit back and do whatever he wants, but people are going to want to know, what's going on with Ali. Like maybe Nevada will start looking closer at his license during fight week. I doubt it, because they've ignored me for about 2 or 3 years. But, now he can't just hide in the shadows. And that's the thing about MMA, I think, that people don't understand, is that it was the perfect storm for a place for him to get, because this is like the dark corner of the sports world. And it's anybody that comes into this with any type of background gets, come on in, we'll take you all. And all the outliers of society would do really well in this sport. It seems that a lot of them do.
Yeah. And in other sports, if you want to be a management or financial advisor, you have to have college degree. You have to like my
FBI background checks.
Yeah, like my ex-agent Jason House of Iridium Sports has a law degree. Mm-hmm. The guy works his butt off. He's honest. I mean, sure, we had I shouldn't have falling out, but we had our differences. That's why we don't work together anymore. But regardless, I still have a lot of respect for the guy. He, as far as agents go, I still send him business all the time. Ours was a personal thing, but
Real quick, I may be wrong here, but I think to be in the NFL as an agent or a manager, you actually have to be approved by the league.
Yes.
You do. Oh, and,
Yeah.
and believe me, someone like Jason, who is educated and does his work properly, he is now working with NFL guys.
Well, one of the crazy things that I found out was if you want to be a licensed in Nevada college sports agent, which college sports or maybe it was high school, one or the other, it's college or high school sport. They make you go through all the background checks and ask they actually ask if your felonies were felonies that were of moral turpitude, which is like fraud, which was what Ali was guilty of. All of those things. And the reason why those are there is to protect the athletes from being screwed. So everybody's argument is just that, well, Ali's guys all love him. He takes such great care of them. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but there are rules for a reason. There are laws for a reason. Why should they make this where it's any different than anywhere else? California, you need to do an FBI background check. So you have to give them fingerprints and they do a background check. In Nevada, their legislation says that they may ask you. Well, you'd think that this would be a reason to do it, wouldn't you? If somebody brought you all this evidence that I've brought them, you think that maybe they'd say, well, maybe we should. Well, I think the horse has already left the barn, and either they didn't make him fill in an application, which is a big deal because that's something that happened in Edmonton that they're looking into. But if they just gave him a license by making him pay the fee without looking into him and looking into his child support, that's a big deal because they're responsible and they're at fault in that. So I don't know. There's so many different parts to it that I had somebody ask me the other day, and it was the way that they put it sounded funny, but it was like they hit the nail on the head. They said, how does he even exist in this sport anymore after everything that he's been done and that's been brought, forward about him? But everybody was very easily swayed and convinced that they shouldn't talk about my stuff. Like Ariel has done the most actually asking Ali about it. I won't say much about how, I consider his follow-ups to some of the questions because he didn't press them. We had some candid not off the record. It was like behind the scenes DMs. And I gave him a list of lies that Ali told him. And again, as a journalist to a journalist, I'm like, these were all inaccurate. I've got evidence that these were all, him talking about missing weight for the Olympics, everything. His response, and it just made me kind of just say, well, there it is right there. I said, he said something back to me, and I said, well, actually, this might be public. I don't know if the tweets got deleted. I'm trying to think back. But he said something to the effect of, I remember saying, well, this is about accuracy. And I said, how would your journalism professors know or feel if they knew that you were taking what somebody said as fact and going with it without correcting it? I said, because these are all lies. And he said, and I said, the other thing is that I said, we have power as journalists to give people the limelight. Like people kind of look at it as like Ali has all this power over everybody. Well, guess what? There's different press that you can get, good press, bad press. There's all kinds of press that, there's a pay for play type of thing where, if you're good to me, I'll be good to you and we'll find out, whatever. But if I find out that you're doing something wrong, you better believe I'm going to write about it. So I said to Ariel, I said, he's lying to you. I said, wouldn't you want to maybe put him on notice and say to him, listen, Ali, like you're lying to me, He said to me that if he cut off all of the people that lied to him, that he would have nobody left to interview. And that's the problem. If you're willing to settle for mistruths, like Kayla Harrison went on the MMA Hour the other day and said that she'd met Noah, basically trying to throw water on the flames, and said, I've met Noah. And Ariel actually posted that he'd met Noah. He's like, I met him last year. Well, that was the kid that was in the terrorist group that he brought and tried to parade around when my stories were coming out to try to prove that he was a good dad. And he tried to use Noah in that ploy. He tried to take him to an event, and he tried to, and it didn't work out for him. And I don't know if he told people if this kid was Noah or what it was, or if they're just, maybe just assuming it was, but that's false information. And, if somebody were to let me know that I posted something even on Twitter that was wrong, I'm a journalist. I'm supposed to be accurate. So I like to try to make things right, because people are supposed to look at journalists as the tellers of truth. And if you're not telling the truth, then what are you doing? So, for him to say that he doesn't care about the truth, to me, that was a bit of a, I don't even know. It was a shocking statement to hear from somebody that's, journalist of the year, right? Gross. It is. If you're not putting the truth first and the public's interest first, and you're putting maybe the feelings of Ali first, because that seems like in a lot of cases, I'm not saying just with Ariel, but with a lot of people, they're kind of putting his feelings first and giving him the opportunity to ask him questions, but nobody comes to me other than guys like you to say, hey, what's your side of things here? He can say all kinds of things about me and, the fact that I'm a cockroach and this is personal and I'm a manager or something. And he likes to drop all these insults and veiled little digs at me. And, nobody ever asked my side of the story. So I'm going to tell my side of the story, and it's going to be fact-based, and it's going to prove, I think, to a lot of people that, I'm not making things up. And that was the number one reason I think I stuck with it, is because people played me like I was Alex Jones for like 3 years. People were like, you're some conspiracy theorist. Like all of his supporters too. They're you talk about all the Conor supporters. I've had death threats from people, veiled ones, where they've said, if you lied like you are about Ali, where I'm from, then all 3 of your daughters would be raped in front of you brutally and you would be killed or maybe sliced like a pig or something like that. And I'm like, this isn't normal. The fact that I'm not making any money off this, and most people would say, well, this isn't really worth it for me. Like you can get why some people decide that they don't want to write about this. They just want to do fight predictions, is because it's not worth it, right? There's not a lot. It's not a glory job. Like I'm not doing this to be famous, obviously, because I've been shunned for so long. And it's like I've never wanted to hold a microphone in front of someone's face. I've done it and I didn't like it, but I don't know, man. It's a weird sport that we're in, that like people stick up for these, like criminals and
actual
people have psychopaths. But that's part of it, right? They've if you look at, that's the other thing that kind of it made me, it was upsetting to hear that these kids are watching Ali paint this picture of his life on Instagram with his kids. And, you hear stories that maybe he's not the most faithful of husbands. And, there's things going on that everything that you see is not as it seems. And that's the beauty is that for Ali is that he has figured out how to harness the internet to help perpetuate his story. If you look, there was on his actual dominant site when I started this story, and I've screen grabbed it since, and I can get, other copies of it through the Wayback Machine. He said that he had like a 530 record in judo, and that it was well documented. And he said on that one, he said he was 18 when he was in the Olympics. And he said, he had all these different like things about how he was one of the best judo players and all this stuff. Everything was a lie. You're reading through it going, well, this isn't true. Well, this isn't true. Well, this isn't true. Well, he's since changed it to that it doesn't really say anything. And different parts of his life, he wasn't telling people he was even at the Olympics, let alone in the Olympics. And then it just kind of came about. And the way that it came about was he kind of muddied all the messages of his life, like how he had actually trained at the Olympic Training Center in the States. That was like about, and he dated an Olympian. Like I told you earlier, he was dating an Olympian. He was never in any way, shape, or form in contention to be an Olympian. There was no way that he would have been one. He actually was posing as an American when he was trying to get on the Olympic team. And that's where the story kind of takes off and where it kind of gets, goes on a roller coaster ride, was how and why he started using fake identities. So it's if it's all a coincidence, he is the most unlucky person I have ever heard of in my life, right? Like if it's all, you were booked on a 9/11 flight, you had all these IDs, you were raising all this money, you had an actual link in your crimes to this terrorist group. All of these things, you look at them and you go, man, if that was a coincidence, you were Mr. Wrong Place, Wrong Time your whole entire life. But man, it's not just him. He's got a brother that some of my sources that'll talk about it on the podcast say that was a bank robber and did life in prison in Egypt. So I think, if you look into psychopathy, you look into the backgrounds of people, and I've done a deep dive by, digesting everything I can and talking to all the experts I can. The problem is that no experts want to kind of say and justify that that's what somebody is without actually diagnosing them. But I mean, he's got a lot of the traits. We'll just say he's got most of the traits of psychopathy. Yeah. So if you dig into that, you see that there's a part in people's lives that if they're predisposed to have this, and I've talked actually to, other people like Noah about it, and about, other people that I've talked to about psychopathy, because I get so involved in my research that I'm becoming like a pseudo expert in it, right? So like people, I'm having conversations with people and like they're like, oh my God, you've just like enlightened me on somebody that's in my life. So everybody knows somebody like this that has no empathy, but they say that the problem is when they're very young, if they go through something traumatic like, extreme poverty or abandonment or abuse, people that have all of these genetic things, it comes out. And it changes their brain chemistry. So there's actually a really good podcast called Sword and Scale, and they did one on psychopathy, and they had an actual like PhD psychiatrist psychologist who by mistake diagnosed himself with psychopathy because of the brain scans and figured out that he's a psychopath. He's a functioning psychopath. And he said it was shocking, but he said I started talking to all these people in my life, and they're like, yeah, we always kind of knew that you had all these traits and characteristics, but the difference was, he said, he was loved, and he was, he had he was like the favorite of the family, and it could have gone very differently for him, but he has, he's cognizant of some of the things like they've got they always want revenge. That's the thing about psychopaths. They can't just let things go. They can't walk away. There's so many things, but that's, Ali, I tell you, all of his victims, and, people will say, well, how much of a victim were they? All of the people in his life that he left in his wake, that either some of them were suffering from extreme Stockholm syndrome. They had a feeling he was the victim in all of this. They felt the government was out to get him. You start giving them the facts, and they're like, oh my God, this is not at all how it was painted to me by him. He had, some of his victims had their lives ruined because of him, and we'll get into all that stuff too. But I mean, man, I'm if I think back in my life, and as you've gotten older probably, and TJ, you probably thought, man, there's some shit that I've done, I shouldn't have said that to somebody, or you kind of think about, maybe you're an asshole to one of your friends in high school. You start thinking about things and think about how you've changed and grown, and I don't think he does that, because that statement that he made to Ariel, that, and even the way he looked at the camera, my degree's in PR, like I told you. So I see through speeches, and it kind of gives me a really good advantage when it comes to stories that, I see through the bullshit. Well, the way that he even turned to the camera to say it was like he had staged and rehearsed that. Like maybe somebody helped him, like maybe it was World Series of Fighting helped him with that statement, but he made the same statement twice. I'm going to tell you one thing I will say. Everything I've done in my past, I'm proud of. And if I'm not proud of it, then I've always issued a public statement about it. Well, guess what? Let's see how honest you are. Let's see, when all of this comes out, we want to hear you talk publicly about it. That's the only thing that I wanted from this from day one. When I started the investigation, I was about to write the story about him with all the manager bullshit he was doing that I had evidence of. I tweeted at him, like I still do with everything that I do. And I said, you got one more chance to give me an interview. And then, because I already tweeted that I was writing about this, and people were like, oh. So World Series of Fighting exec messages me and says, you need to look into his past, and mentioned a few things like NYPD, blah, blah. So I get down the rabbit hole, and I'm like, oh my God, and found this book. And it was like, you guys probably the first time reading the stuff that you're like, this can't be real, And it was like, well, then I told somebody.
There's just so much.
Yeah, there is. And a lot of it seems like just pure fantasy. So I told somebody in the MMA community, Front Row Brian, I told him what I was writing about.
Fuck that guy. I fucking hate that piece of shit.
I never had any issues with him other than this one, but I think, he felt bad afterwards. But he had been having problems with Ali, like you.
Yeah.
And I knew he did because I had been seeing it online, and, I told him what I was writing about, and he tweeted about it. And then other reporters started catching on and were messaging that I'd been speaking to about the stories, and were like, hey, guess what I found? And I'm like, let me guess, this. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, well, guess what? I told somebody, and they, I knew it came from me. Nobody would have found it unless I actually, dug it up. But yeah, I thought that was it. And the story was going to be one and done. And then, I'm getting the biggest thing about investigative journalism is that people get emboldened when other people tell their stories. So I've had, even since the Connor thing, I've had other sources come forward. Like I told you, I've got a source that was in the group that, saw some shit, and he's got some, very crazy details about this organization. He even knew Ali's father-in-law that tried to kill him. So, this group is not one that you'd want to tick off, and he chose the fight with them, and that's the crazy part about it. And yes, apparently there is a so-called I don't know if it would be a bounty or what it would be, but they were given the order, right? Like they call it a fatwa in the Islamic community. Apparently the order did go out to if people got the chance to kill him. But the problem is that this group has denied the violence, and they've rebranded and changed their name and their leadership and everything else, but they've still got the ties to the top. The guy that actually is running it here, Ali, to get close to him, used some of his NYPD money or the money that he got from other people he informed on, and bought a car lot and basically let this guy put his name on it. That's how he rose to prominence originally. He's like, hey, let's start this car lot, because he's throwing money around at people, right? He was driving Mercedes, and so this car lot basically acted as his personal garage. He just drove mostly. He didn't really sell any cars or anything, but the car lot was under this leader's name, and you read that on Fukra Files. That's the problem, I think, with a lot of the stuff on Fukra Files was that was stuff that, like, I said in passing that I was using for my story that they stole from me. You know what I mean? So kind of rubs me the wrong way that now that, the guy that's running it has never ever watched MMA, wasn't a big fan of it before. He's going around, like, on your page, starting conversations with, like, people in the community, telling them to go, like, read his website and stuff. And it's like, come on, seriously? Like, most of that stuff's mine. I wrote most of that stuff, other than the stuff that actually names me, like where it's like Mike Russell. The only reason that it actually names me is because I gave him shit that he wasn't crediting with me with half the stuff that he was using, right? Like the green card brides, right? I didn't want that out there because I was using it, and all of a sudden I look on that website and they're there, and I'm like, man, like, what's...
Yeah, you're ruining my story here, bro.
He's doing it on purpose, because I quit writing for them because he was asking me to do stuff that was dishonest. He wanted me to, like, fudge some of my facts, and I refused to. So I said, I knew how this was going to end, and I walked away from it. I walked away from that paying job as well. So anybody that questions my integrity, look at the fact that I'm not working a real high-paying job because I keep walking away from all of these writing jobs that want me to, like, even Yahoo Sports. They got to the point where they were like, pitch everything you do. And I was pitching for days, treating this as my job, and they were saying, no, unless Connor came up, Ronda came up. So they're basically using the same list, of Google analytics and everything that the UFC is using, and anything like that, they'd accept. And I'm just like, you know what? That's not what I want to do. I don't want to write. I don't want to contribute to the problem. I want to change it. So, I became a starving artist and started doing my own stuff. But here's the thing. Everybody says, like, why are you only working on 2 stories? My 2 stories have actually created some change and some awareness. And, if Tim Hagg's family gets a little bit of retribution for this, then I'd be happy with that. I don't know how Ali's story is going to end. And that's the problem about telling the story. It's still underway. So there's no end to it per se. Like, and everybody's like, well, what's your end game here? I'm like, well, I want people to know who he really is. And I want him to answer to, like, I have some questions. Like you said, there are some murders that I have been told that he had a hand in that, I think if he doesn't answer it, then maybe the FBI can get him to answer it. And that's the other thing. I've had FBI agents actually reach out to me since I've been writing this. And because of the Connor thing, they've been sending me messages saying, yeah, you got this guy's number, or, you're right on the money about this guy, or we can't believe he's still in America, but he's there on an asylum claim. That's how he was able to stay. He tugged at the heartstrings about, I've got all my family here, all these kids, and well, at that time there was only one of them that he actually saw. So a lot of his excuses for things that, like, oh, my family and this and that, were just excuses. And again, it goes back to the NYPD's advice. I've got it actually up on my bulletin board, and I look at it every time I read another thing that Ali said. And I said, check the facts, right? And I go through, and like I said, 9 times out of 10. Look, here's a perfect one for you. Remember Cody Garbrandt loses his last fight? Well, only one story comes out that Ali fed to Ariel that Cody broke his hand in that fight. The only other incidence of anything there was that he got a suspension for a possible broken hand, but there was no proof that he actually broke his hand other than them saying it might be broken, which you know yourself. If you think your nose is broken, they give you well, let's clear his nose, or if your eye's, injured, they want you to clear that. Well,
you have to if you want to keep.
Yeah. Cody's all over Instagram and everything, like gripping both his hands with a new tattoo and, like in the gym and everything. He's never mentioned a broken hand, and he's done interviews. It's like, that's something you talk about. So all I said was, let's see some proof. Let's see an x-ray, because if not, then Ali's doing what he has done. There are two stories out there. There's one by Kevin Ioli, and I've sent messages to Kevin. He's ignored me, and I worked with him at Yahoo. I told you that. He actually gave me shit one time because I spent, I think, 90 minutes on the phone to Cody McKenzie. He told me he wouldn't spend 90 minutes with Floyd Mayweather, and I'm like, man, that's kind of backwards. If the conversation's good, like us, we've been almost 2 hours here on the phone. Yeah. So I'm like, I look up all these facts, and it's like, how did he get to this point where he's lied so much? Well, it's because we've helped him. The media have let him have an unchecked pulpit, basically, to spread his lies. So there's a Damon Martin story that first kind of launched this, that he was an Olympian. That's the first one that was in MMA, because Ali told him that he competed in Atlanta. And then I don't know if Kevin Ioli just lazily copied and pasted it or what he did, but there was no, he doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. So unless Ali told him, he wrote a story about Ronda Rousey and said, well, Ali was trained with her at the Olympic Training Center. They were, Ali competed in Atlanta. Well, one of those stories is true, that he may have competed at the Olympic Training Center, but he didn't compete anywhere and he wasn't on any Olympic team. But I mean, here's the thing. If somebody were to tell me my story is incorrect, I will fix it. The reason why my website is down right now is because a lot of the facts that I used from all the sources that, Ali told about stuff it was incorrect. And I'm like, I took it down, and I probably took a hit. Like, I was for 2 years, I was the number one source for when you Googled Ali's name, I was coming up before his Twitter, because it was that popular. It was the story that people read the most, and he hated it. So now it's not quite, but you wait for my website back up next week. And it changed pretty quick, because I know for a fact that, nobody else would take down a story if it meant that they were going to have to lose a little bit of traffic. But I mean, it's about honesty, right? It's about accuracy. So
this whole thing it still blows my mind every single day. There's something else, a little tidbit from this person or this person, an article here, article there. And, it's crazy. And to think even like Connor touched on the ties with the Chechen dictator, what's his name?
Kadyrov.
Yeah. Even ties that Ali put, prominent UFC people in with this guy, who is a vicious dictator, throwing gays off roofs and openly oh no, there's no gay people in this country, they're all dead, kind of thing. Yeah. The guy is just so heavily steeped in bad people that I don't see a way out for him. I do really true believe and hope that this is the end of this guy, and I'm excited to see the fall. I really am, because he you want to see the bad guy lose. You do, and it has to happen. UFC, Nevada State Athletic Commission, I know you're listening to this. Do your fucking work, please, and get rid of this dude. He's bad news. I mean, just look at the facts, plain and simple. Do your job. Make him fill out a proper application. Make him do this. Make him jump through the hoops you make everyone else jump through, so we can exterminate this motherfucker from our sport. We get rid of him. I don't wish death on anybody, but you know what? He needs to be kicked out of this country so he can find asylum somewhere else. Because this is in no way, shape, or form good. I mean, it is all bad, and it's only getting worse. It's only getting deeper, and it's what's next? What else can he do? What else can he get away with?
depends on which media he's got under his thumb, I guess. But I mean, it's one of those things, man. It's if we don't, and the fans are taking it to him. I don't know if you've noticed his social media. He had to shut off his Instagram comments. He had to, all of his Twitter is it's like it's being swallowed up by McGregor fans that are like, you know, or maybe not just McGregor fans. I'm just assuming that because everybody heard it from Conor, but you know, they're asking him about Noah. He posts something about, oh, I love you, my brother, and all this stuff. And they're like, well, why don't you show this to your son? And I'll tell you, man, other than there are some jackasses that have started fake Noah accounts. And I know that's kind of, you know, something that the family isn't keen on.
Yeah,
it's shitty. It's shitty. And I've told them, and then they, you know, make jokes back to me because it's their 5 minutes of fame, I guess, that's how they're going to do it. But, you know, I'll tell everybody that Noah's last name is not Abdelaziz, nor will it probably ever be Abdelaziz. But yeah, like it's inspiring to see that people are taking, you know, maybe if it is for the wrong reasons, then I guess I can't say that, but I think a lot of people are just, it hits home with people, and people have talked about it on other shows that it resonates when everybody's been affected by deadbeat dad, right? Like everybody knows somebody. Everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, and it's, you know, it's not just once, it's twice, and it's the same thing where he's just used up what he could from people. But, you know, I think it's important to know that all of his victims share the same thing, that they now are starting to realize it wasn't them, and it had nothing to do with them in any of the cases. So it's a hard thing. Go listen to, like, there's the Dear John podcast kind of goes into that. You know, it's a sickness that people have, that they just like to take advantage of people. And I think that's what Ali has done. I've even talked to World Series of Fighting people that were really, really good to him, that did stuff like paid his rent and, you know, did a lot of really nice things for him when he needed it and helped him out. And then he screwed them over. So, you know, it's one of those things. They say that psychopaths will wait to get their revenge. And you know what? Ali's been trying with me. He's been, I heard that I don't know if it's through him, but I've heard that there's some private investigators that have been looking into me, and it's like, whatever, you know, go ahead and look. There's nothing to find, but I don't know, man. He's called me his enemy to people, like reached out to people that I know that weren't telling me any information and saying, hey, stop consorting with my enemy, basically. So, you know, he likes to keep saying that it's personal and I've made it personal and stuff. But I mean, here's the thing, man. It's as personal as me wanting to do my job. And it's become personal too, because, you know, I want this done and over with. I want this story kind of out there, and I want, you know, I've been not ridiculed, but I've been, you know, relegated to being some conspiracy theorist. And I think that's, you know, hopefully that'll change when the truth comes out. But there's always going to be people that are going to hate and try to deny, you know, credibility because it's inconvenient to their beliefs, or it's inconvenient to the fact that they're friends with Ali, or that they're, you know, maybe they want to be like Ali, or maybe they think he'll give them a job because they're Muslim. And, you know, there are a lot of people that I think are enamored by what he's portraying himself to be online. And I think knowing the truth is, you know, I know they say knowing is half the battle. That's a cheesy way to say it from G.I. Joe, but it's true, man. I always say this, buyer beware. People say, why are you telling these stories? Buyer beware. You know, people need to know who they're dealing with, because it's hard to make an informed decision when you're being presented with a resume written by a used car salesman about how great he is, right? Like, people don't get that. Everybody, when they go on a blind date, is going to say they're the most perfect person in the world, or they go for an interview. Well, these people just never stop lying. You know, everybody lies on their resume, maybe says that they had an extra, you know, skill here or there or whatever, but this is a whole different animal that we're dealing with. And I think that from talking with the people I did, I think I was dealing with the same thing with the guy in Edmonton. I think that he still to this day, the guy from Edmonton that basically is responsible for Tim Hag is going to the Ringside Physicians seminar this year, and to figure out, he was fired because of negligence. He is giving a speech on all the things that can go wrong to lead to a fighter's death, and we figure he's going to be presenting his defense for the lawsuit that's coming, which I'm going to be helping on, by the way. But like, what a brazen thing to do. That's like somebody like a serial killer telling you, actually Ted Bundy did this. And I was talking to my wife about it today, because we were listening to a psychopath podcast, and Ted Bundy actually, on his, I don't know if it was while he was going to be executed or it was very close, reached out to police about an article that he'd read about this serial killer and offered to help them. And during the process of helping them, it was like he was confessing. He was like, I think that they probably chopped the head off and took it home and did this to. And it was like, it was chilling because he was using that because he had this narcissism from this psychopathy. He was using that as almost like a thrill for him to be able to tell how he did something and got away with it without actually telling about it. And that's what this reminds me of with Ali when he's, like trying to pull the strings. By the way, I heard Chicago, you guys, I don't know if you heard about the, where he broke into a manager's hotel room allegedly and beat him up and then ended up poaching the fighter from him weeks later. Well, that's still going on. I heard that there's still an investigation going there. He's told everybody it's bullshit and it's a lie. And he was asked by Ariel and he said, oh, well, why am I not in jail? The one thing that bothers me is that he never answers a question with an answer when it's a question he doesn't want to answer. Why? Can you tell him? Ariel will ask him about his history and his past, and he'll say, can you speak to Mike Russell's allegations or whatever, all these questions about it in different ways. And he always says, if I was a bad guy, would I know Henzo Gracie? Would I know these guys? By association, he's using other people's reputations to make himself look better. And it's hilarious to me because it's always a deflection. And with, I've talked to like FBI profilers and they're like, yeah, they said like, even when he failed this lie detector test, they were asking him direct questions because they knew the answers to them already because of stuff that happened. And he was just shutting down and refusing to answer. They'd be like, well, this is what the lie detector test is showing. He's like, well, it's wrong. It's wrong. And people, everybody says it's pseudoscience and stuff with lie detectors. Well, he was only showing deception to 2 questions asked 8 different ways in different order of there'd be 10 questions. He'd answer the same 2 wrong. And it was, are you working for someone else? Have you shared any information about what you're doing for the NYPD and the FBI with any other government agencies? And both of them came up deceptive on 2 different polygraph tests administered within 2 weeks. Jesus. So, it's a lot, man. It's a lot. And it's a heavy topic. That's the other thing, too, I think, is a lot of people are afraid of the Islamic, that side of it. But, I mean, I'm an atheist, so I've got, I'm agnostic. Atheist, I guess, more so than agnostic, because I'm an investigative journalist. It'd be hard for me to tell everybody that I need answers and proof of everything except for the man that I believe is in the sky, or I was raised Catholic and I call myself a recovering Catholic.
This has nothing to do with religion.
Nothing to do with it. And I've actually gone to great lengths to learn about the religion the last 3 years. And I told you I worked for it was Clarion Project, which was actually the owner of Fuqra Files, but they were like an anti-terrorism, anti-extremism type site. And even the gentleman I'm talking to for the podcast that was in this group that knew all these serial bombers and killers and murderers, he and I will joke around about how it's called haram, it's like a sin. All the stuff that they're perpetrating, idolizing this cult leader and everything else, it's a sin. So, I've learned about all this stuff and I relate because I know how ridiculous some of the stuff that they were doing was. But I mean, I have nothing against Muslims, and that's the lowest denominator. People keep trying to bring up the fact that they think that I'm an Islamophobe because I'm writing about a person who happened to be in a terror cult, right? It's like, I didn't put that narrative in there. I'm not spinning it, but people keep asking, well, why do you have to bring that part of it up? Or you're racist, you're a bigot, you're this, you're that, you're the other. Well, I'm not. I'm just, no matter what angle it's going to be, I'm not going to leave out details that are pertinent to it. And I think the fact that this was a group that was killing rival religious groups, I think that was a big part of the story. So, hopefully people are going to this is going to open dialogue and it's going to make people talk, because I think there are a lot of people that will still kind of avoid it because they have to see Ali. Like it's a small community, right? So
very small. I mean, at the highest levels, this is a tiny community.
Yeah.
I mean, and let's say if he was part of the KKK, I'd do the same shit. Shitty people are shitty people, and they need to be dealt with, and obviously if people want to find out, I mean, the extensive amount of information, what's the name of your podcast that's coming out?
It's going to be on my website, so realfightstories.com. Name of this podcast will be, so season 1 of Real Fight Stories will be called Rat in a Cage, the unbelievably true real life story of Ali Abdelaziz.
Wow. And then that's how many parts?
We're looking at 6 to 10, could be more, just because like I said, we keep getting more sources, right? So I have alone sitting here in front of me a binder with about 300 or 400 pages worth of police documents. So that's just on him. That's just his police documents. Then I have, binders of just documents of these crimes that all these people perpetrated. Man, it's been a lot of research. I had to learn about a religion to be able to do this, right? And learn about psychopathy and learn about con games, learn about, all the different aspects that I had to learn about. I had to learn about how you qualify for Olympic judo, right? Like people can say what they want about me, but I don't think that there's anybody, and I think it's probably partially my ADHD, maybe a little bit OCD, and just, obsession of being, I don't have to be right, but when I know I'm right and people are telling me I'm wrong, then that's, there's nothing that drives me crazier. So I think that's it. I'm just trying to, I guess, just prove the facts that I brought forward that people have questioned, that there's everything will check out. Let's just say that everything will be in its place, and everything will have something that will prove everything that I'm saying.
Yeah, and if there is something like you said in those other article that the Farouk files, if it's wrong, you're not going to put it in there.
No, and I'll correct it.
You're a real journalist who's doing real work. Simple as that. And again, I commend you to the end of the earth for doing this, because this needed to happen, and man, I'm proud to call you my associate and friend at this point, because you're doing an amazing job, man.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. So yeah, that's the end game here. People are asking what my end game is. Like, they're like, there has to be a rub. Why are you doing this? There was no end game. I actually, that interview I sent you about a year ago, I did with Elias Theodoro. I said, if this doesn't pan out for me, I was setting up, I think, a PayPal at the time. I said, if this doesn't pan out, I'm going to have to tap out, because, I've got 5 kids and I'm working a full-time job. Sometimes I work a couple jobs depending on how much money I'm going to need, right? And there's just, where I live, there are not a lot of PR jobs because of the way that the economy is here, and a lot of the different people that are working in PR, most of them aren't even PR people. And it's like, I don't know how to break into, I gave up my PR degree to cover MMA, basically, because I was in school when I started. I got, Loretta Hunt actually picked me up kind of, out of the blue. It was just coincidental. I was working for a UK-based magazine that was shutting down, and I interviewed the owner of the Fight Network, who said, hey, you should talk to Loretta Hunt. And she was the editor at the time, so she gave me my compass, and she kind of, everybody says you're like MMA's Dexter, like MMA reporting's Dexter. I said, she's the one that set my compass, because I had no clue what I was doing. But it wasn't just her. It was like there was a community of people like her and Josh Gross and Greg Savage and all the people that, were kind of learning the sport and how to cover it. They were just sharing, this is how you do it. So even Stephen Morocco, he worked with Loretta at one time, and we over the years, have talked a bunch. And when one of my stories came out, I got a message from him, and he said, "What would Loretta have said?" And it was I didn't get both sides. I did, but I didn't write that I'd tried to get both sides of the story, so I just had to put it in there. But I'm like, yeah, you're right, and but that's it. That's how, when I was coming up, everybody was helpful and everybody promoted everybody's stuff. Now we've got this kind of us and them mentality. I guess reporters are really critical of stuff. I don't understand why they're so critical of me. I guess maybe because I call them out and they don't like to have it rubbed in their faces. But I mean, here's the thing. It's like, how, I don't understand how you could be happy with the state of MMA journalism if you're in it. And that's, you talk about Hunter S. Thompson. He's one of my biggest influences, has been Hunter S. Thompson, guys like, there are a lot of people that influence my style. And I think that's why I tell the stories with myself in them. But he never put up with people's shit. And he always talked about how journalism was and what was going on. But, we'll talk again about, on a different episode about how these sites are making money. I've got a shocking investigation that I've been doing into what's paying the bills for people. People talk about clicks, and it's scary how sites and even MMA promotions are paying the bills with us and with our information. It's gross when you look at it that way. So my end game is to hopefully be able to do this on a more full-time basis. And we've talked about possibly, if I make enough money, bringing on guys like Karim and other people for contributions. But I mean, if we could create a news desk like I started with Loretta, man, we could have guys like Jordan Breen. We could have guys, all these guys. That I have a list of guys that I'd love to have, that we'd have a news desk that we'd be taking on stories like this weekly, right? And we'd be covering stories like this on a regular basis, and it would be the go-to site for investigative work.